All right, we're going to go ahead and get started here with guide video 4 for our starting car mechanic simulator guide series. So we'll go ahead and pop into our guide save here and get ready to take on the 4th story car. Depending on where we get here, we might take a customer car too, depending on my time. I have a hard stop here later. So we're in here to the guide save, and we'll pop into our garage just to refresh everyone's memory as far as where our mechanic's at. We're a level 7. We have $4,818. We've accumulated 134 scrap material, which we're not using yet, of course. Skill-wise, we have 2 points into improved fast hands, so our screwing speed is better. Strong arms to mount and dismount parts faster. We put a point into discounts on parts, so we get cheaper prices at stores, and we get cheaper prices on our alley, which is your own personal parking garage where you can park your cars that you'll eventually purchase and keep for yourself. So pop out here, and at level 7, if you go to your map, excuse me, we have unlocked the junkyard. So that has given us some options of other things we could start doing to cars here. So that's going to give us some other ways to make some money and also find parts and find cars. In fact, we'll consider doing that maybe after we finish our story car. Parking garage, that's where we park our cars. Right now we don't have any cars. We have one alley unlocked. It would cost us $25K to open alley 2. This is where you could store vehicles that you own. We have the car salon, which is the car dealership. The speed track, where you could take a car and race it. You could take a car to photo locations to take pictures of it. I have the drag strip DLC, so I have access to the drag race strip. We have the racetrack, the test track, parking, your garage. So let's head back to our garage, and we'll go to our phone. And here is that preview that we gave you last time for the Mitsubishi Eclipse, or the Hinata Moon MK1 Sunrise. It's a Mitsubishi Eclipse. Anywho, let's read the story here. Hello! I saw that you have got quite good reviews, and I thought you'll surely handle my problem. I've been to a few experts already. The things that each expert said and didn't match, or the things that each expert said and didn't match up at all. Of course, the problem is still there. It boils down to this constant banging. It's unbearable. And the gearbox isn't working properly after the last repair. After a week, changing gear became a nightmare. Changing gears is what it should say. It became a nightmare. Please check it and try to fix any problems. I'm counting on your honesty. It's the last chance for my car. If this doesn't do the trick, I'll have no other options but to get rid of it. Anyway, let me know what happens. And also, change the oil, drain, and refill with new. Again, we did this on the past 3 story cars, so this will be old hat for us. So let's take this order. All right, so we'll start off the same way we did last time. Let's check the car status, go straight to the phone. Oh, we have a whole bunch of undiscovered parts. In fact, no parts here are identified for us, which is different than our other previous story cars. So we're going to have to do some diagnostics here to figure out what's going wrong with this car. Change oil and drain with new. That's the only thing that we know so far as this got goes. So we're going to have some diagnostic stuff here. So this will be fun. All right. So just for fun, let's just sit in the car. Got digitals. Looks like an automatic. Digital radio. All right. She's a cool looking Mitsubishi. Let's pop the hood here. And We're in the engine bay. Let's go ahead and do some diagnostics. So let's right click, go to our additional tools. We'll start with the onboard diagnostic or OBD scanner. Let's go ahead and run this. It'll connect to the car and check a few things. This is actually a good thing to have in your own garage. All right, so we got an ignition coil, some spark plugs that are bad, clearly. So I'm betting this car doesn't even start. That's one thing. Okay. So if we go to our car's status right there, boom, ignition coil and spark plug. So we know we have a couple of parts figured out that we got to correct. All right. So next diagnostic tool. So we did the onboard diagnostic scanner. Let's go to the compression test. See if these pistons and piston rings are good. Anywho, the OBD scanner, a good one to have. If your own car comes up with like a yellow check engine light, those OBD scanners, they're not very pricey. You can pick them up on Amazon. There's a little computer port underneath the dash. You can Google, how to find that for your particular vehicle. You plug that sucker in, and you can run that code yourself. You don't have to take it to a dealer to find that code. And then you look up the code online, see what the issue is, and you could do that repair yourself. Oh, okay. So we have 2 bad pistons and a bad camshaft. So that definitely could be giving this guy the knock and the sound he's been having, and probably also not start the car. It's interesting how this guy got here. All right, so compression test, electronic multimeter. Let's check on the battery and the electro digitals. And you'll notice your mechanic's experience just going up and up and up. Pretty useful to do these diagnostics. One, they're fun to do, but 2, you're getting experience for it. Okay, so this all looks in the yellow, which generally means these parts are fine. Okay. So we did the electronics, we did the OBD. Let's check on the tires, see if the tires are okay. It's just tread tester. Another way to test your treads, a little penny. See if it's, up above aim blinking, right? Sport tires, they're all good. All right. And let's check the fuel system. All right, the fuel system looks okay, so that's good. So if we go to our car status, there's still a bunch of parts that we have not identified. Now, I believe this car with these issues on the spark plugs, it probably won't start. But let's try this. Let's go to our map. Let's go to the test track and see if we can take this car. Yep, the engine can't be started. That's what I thought. But that would be another way that we could do some tests on the suspension system, on the brake system. You just take it to the test track. You'd run it through a test drive. But until we correct the issues with the ignition system, those spark plugs that are bad, the piston that's bad, this sucker won't start. So this guy must have, I don't know how he got this car here. He must have used our Ford F-150 over here and pulled it in. So another way we can start to look at parts. You can see the parts that we've examined now with our diagnostic tools are lit up with colors. So if you click on a wheel, for example, it will put your mechanic's peepers on these bad boys and see if there's any suspension parts on this right side that are screwed up. That'll give us some other diagnostics. We can look at each of these issues. Here's the, can I look at the radiator? Nope. Look at the air filter in the air filter box. And look at the fuse box. I think we can look at the main suspension here. That gives us some issue. So we can see some red parts already. The drive shaft there, so front wheel drive. That looks like that is not doing well. And the way I'm examining these parts, you highlight the part, just hold down your left click, and your mechanic will look at all the parts that he can identify with his eyes and kind of give you an idea of its condition. All right, so I've identified all the parts there that I can. Is there anything else here? Let's check the front left side. It kind of checks the suspension on the left side of the front wheel here. And I'm just holding down the left click until the mechanic will no longer identify parts. All right, so this is all the parts on the front of the vehicle that we can identify. And if we go to our normal view car status, we found some other stuff here. The clutch plate is bad. The front drive shaft is bad. We can see that plainly coming out of the transmission. That was red. The front sway bar was bad. There's a wheel hub bearing on the front that are both wheel hub bearings on the front are bad. Okay, let's go ahead and go into examine mode on the back of the vehicle and do the same thing here. Kind of examine the back suspension. Okay, the other side. As you're doing this, you can kind of move your mechanic around. All right, I see an orange part there. That looks like that sway bar. A little bit off. When we look at the exhaust, yep, can. The exhaust looked okay. So there's not many parts here that we have not yet identified properly. Let's see if we go to normal view, is that rear sway bar on our list? Rear sway bar A. There we go. So we know we have some work to do on this vehicle. We got a lot of engine work to do. I think we should start there and then go from there as far as getting this thing tuned up properly. So let's go ahead and move the car into the first car lifter. We know we have to drain the oil. There's a fair amount of engine parts that are screwed up, including a piston, which not being able to pull the engine and then do some engine work is somewhat annoying. It's not impossible. You can do a full rebuild with the engine in the car. It's just somewhat irritating. So let's go ahead and drain the oil. We all remember how to grab the engine tool from our first 3 videos. Move that back. So we know we're going to have to, let's go ahead and just pull the oil filter. That'll be the first part we pulled. That one's actually okay. Is that even on our list of things to replace? It isn't. Interesting. So we're going to do an oil change without replacing the filter. How much fun is that? All right. I still had all these old parts from our last job. So let's go ahead and just sell these off real quick. All right. So those are all sold off. Let's go ahead and drop the oil pan here. We know we have to get the pistons out here. So if I go in here, I escaped out of the car for a purpose. So I can go to examine mode. Then I can walk underneath it and I can see which of these pistons is bad. So looking at this, you can clearly see it's piston 2 and 3 that are marked as red. So those are the pistons we're going to have to replace. Now we can take the rod caps off. So that's the cap that is holding that piston in place. We can't remove the piston because the piston has to come out on top above the crankshaft. So to get that off, we're going to have to take the head off of the engine. There's not a way to get the piston out from below. Even if we pulled the crank out, we can't get the piston out, dropping it down this way, unfortunately. So let's go back to normal view. So we know we're going to have to get the head off. We got to replace this drive shaft anywho. And if I'm looking at this just from the eye view, look at those crankshaft bearings. See how rusted those are? Let's pull this one right here. Now this is another way to figure out what the condition a part is in. Just remove it if it looks bad to your eyes. And look at that. Crankshaft bearing cap, 3%. Now I'm betting you dollars here that if I go in here, boom, crankshaft bearing cap was one of the unidentified parts. So once you identify a part that's bad, it will be no longer listed as part undiscovered. It will be identified. So I was pretty sure that was bad just by looking at it. Look at that one. See how rusty it is? Let's pull that bearing too. And I'm betting this one's bad too. So let's go to our inventory. All three are bad. So if we go to our list, crankshaft bearing cap, 3 of them right there. And we know we have to pull piston 2 and piston 3. That one's fine. That one's rusted, so we're going to have to spray a little WD-40 on that bolt. So I got the rod cap off there. Let's take this rod cap off. All right. Are the rod caps bad? Probably. Yep, both rod caps are bad. I mean, generally, if you have bad pistons, you're going to have bad rod caps. Now, this rod cap looks kind of bad here, too. Let's just take that one off, see if that one's bad. 3 rod caps. So 3 rod caps, but 1 piston is fine. That's interesting. That rod cap looks fine, so I'm not even going to pull it. It's just, you know, shiny silver. All right, so let's get the wheels off on both sides. We have 4 bolts that are fine and normal. And 1 bolt here that's rusty, and just right click to get your can of WD-40 to spray the rusty bolt. There we go. Did those brakes look bad to you guys? They don't look bad to me. So we'll test on the brakes and maybe take this to the test path after we get this thing put back together. So to get the trans off, we have to pull the axle here. Let's pull that out. We know we're going to have to pull this because this drive shaft needs to be replaced. Let's go over to the other wheel, take this wheel off. And again, as I'm pulling this off, I'm just eyeballing the brakes. We couldn't examine the brakes just with the examine mode, but I can physically just look at this. This has a little bit of surface rust, not bad. The pad doesn't look terribly rusty. The caliper doesn't look terrible. So I think that's okay. Let's go ahead and pull this axle. We know the wheel bearings are bad. I forgot to pull the bearing on that side too. The bearings sit right in the back, right there. See how that bearing was there? Okay. Then if I look over here, I can now pull the drive shaft out. We're going to have to pull the trans too. We have to get this sway bar off. That's bad. So we can just click on the sway bar. Can't take the sway bar off yet because this link bar here has to come off first. Let's take the link bar off. That nut's rusted. There'll be one on the other side, so let's go over to the other side. Get that link bar off. There we go. Now we can pull the sway bar. That's off. And let's pull the trans. Oh. Starter. Starters typically are right on the transmission because they hook into the flywheel. There's gears there. And this starter, there are some starters in the game that you cannot pull from underneath the car, which is interesting. So you have to actually pull the engine or the car down and then go into the engine bay, click down on the starter, and I can remove the starter from above, but I couldn't remove the starter from below, which is just the way it's designed, I guess. It's fine. So we'll get this bad boy up in the air and go ahead and take that trans off. There we go. The trans is off, and there's some parts here. This bearing looks fine. The clutch pressure plate looks fine. However, clutch plate looks terrible, and the flywheel looks terrible. And if we go to our parts to replace, there's the flywheel and the clutch plate. We knew those were bad. So we're only missing a few more parts that we have yet to discover. That's okay. So next steps here. we're going to have to get that head off so that we can get to the pistons. Everything else here looks okay. So let's get this engine down. So get the car down so that we can get into the engine bay, and then we'll start taking the top off the engine. So we know we took piston 2 and 3. Those were the 2 bad pistons. And if we're looking at the examine mode, it's piston or cylinder 2 and 3 that has the bad ignition coils too. And as you recall, when we go to replace those ignition coils, just like when we were replacing it, I think it was on car 2, you have to put it in the same order. So I might even just scribble myself a note here and say it was on, again, pen and paper, old school stuff, works great. So it was piston 2 and 3 that were bad, and then the ignition coil 2 and 3 were bad. Just a quick note to yourself. Oops, blew my mechanic around. All right, so let's pull all the ignition coils out, because we're going to have to get them all out to be able to take off the cylinder head. That's out. And just let's examine this again. Examine mode. I can see those. I can't see the spark plugs from here. Darn it. So if I go into normal mode, spark plug 1 looks okay. Spark plug 2 and 3. So it's 2 and 3 for the spark plugs. It's just 2 and 3 cylinders just apparently failed on this car. So let's get the cover off. There we go. And let's just pull spark plug 2 and spark plug 3. And if I go in here to my inventory, yeah, those are the 2 bad spark plugs. So just looking at them, those were the 2 that were rustier, so we knew those were bad. Okay, let's get the camshaft bearing caps off. And again, you just click on the one you want, remove the couple of bolts. There we go. And we're going to have to take the other one off too, because we want to get this head off. We're going to get a lot of good experience out of this car. There's going to be a lot of removing parts, and you'll see your experience. Every part you remove, you get a couple points of experience. So this is a good EXP. All right, let's get the timing cap off on the back side of this engine. This is the same engine we had done, I think it was on the last car and the car before. Rusted part there. Okay. And let's go over to the other side of the engine and get this timing cap off. Now to get this one off, we have to come down here. We're going to have to remove the crankshaft pulley first. So to do that, let's remove this idler roller and then the belt. Then we can take the crankshaft pulley off. Then we can take off this valve cover. There's one bolt. One bolt. Then if I go up a little higher, there's another bolt and a rusted bolt. So right click and WD-40 it. Get that off. And down here, take off the tensioner, pull the belt, take this pulley because that's going to be in the way of the cylinder head. There we go. Then we'll take off the cam gear here. And we can pull this camshaft. This camshaft should be able to come out. There we go. Now to take the head, I think we're going to have to take the manifolds off. So we have an intake manifold here. To get to that, we're going to have to take the throttle off first. I'm pulling the 4 bolts that holds the throttle on. Then we'll take the intake manifold off. There's some bolts here. A couple that are rusty. Those are out. The fuel injectors, they sit here in the head too. We'll have to pull the fuel injectors before we pull the head out. They don't look bad. They had surface rust on them. I bet they're all, yep, all in the yellow. So those parts are fine. All right, do we have anything else on the cylinder head? Oh, the exhaust manifold on the back. Now the exhaust manifold, this is a turbo. So we're gonna have to pull the turbo here first. Find where the bolts are. All right, the turbo's off. Now we can pull the exhaust manifold. And there's just a series of 5 bolts here. All right, I think that is it as far as other things that are hooked into the cylinder head. Can we take the head off yet? All right, we're missing something in the cylinder head. Oh, gosh. 2 spark plugs. Come on, folks. Pay attention, Pearson. All right, take the head off. Head is off. All right, so now with the head off, we can take those 2 pistons out. Piston 2, piston 3. Now pistons, when you go to assemble them, here I'm going to show you. Let's go ahead and part mount. When you go to put a piston back in, you'd select a piston, then you have to put rings on. These rings were actually fine. So it's just the piston with the connecting rod that needs to be replaced. But just to be on the safe side, let's double check our list. So the pistons were fine, the rings were fine. There's some parts here that we still have not yet identified. I have a suspicion it's going to end up being suspension parts because we have basically the whole engine broken down. There's the alternator there. It looks fine. Water pump, little surface rust looks fine. The oil filter we already pulled will look fine. Digit block looks fine. The 2 pistons we haven't pulled look fine. There was the 3rd rod cap that looked bad. And we already compression tested the engine, so we know the other rings were actually okay too. So likely it's going to be a suspension part that is yet identified, but we can identify that by just taking it to the test track after we get this thing running. So that being said, let's escape out of here. Let's sort our list. This is a useful function. The sort down here at the bottom, you could press C to get it to it, or you could click it. I'm going to sort it by condition highest at the top or condition lowest at the top going down. So that way we put in all of our red parts here in order. These red parts are the parts that are broke and really need to be replaced. So I'm going to add this all to the shopping list. I'm just going to double check my shopping list here real quick. It's empty. So back into my inventory, right click, and I'm just going to go through all of these parts and just right click each one of them, knowing full well that all those red parts, which that was actually all just on the first page, are parts that we need to replace. So then if I go to my tablet by hitting T, pull up the car parts, then I'll go to my shopping list, front sway bar, buy, piston with connecting rod, I need 2, because it was piston 2 and 3, written here on my old trusty piece of paper. Take the parts off that I just purchased. I need 3 crankshaft bearing caps. Purchased. I need 2 wheel hub bearings. Clutch plate. Ignition coils. Now the reason those are not coming up, those are at the electronics store. Same for the spark plugs, if you remember that from our last video. Cam gear A. Let's buy that. Rod caps. We need 3 rod caps. Timing chain. Front drive shaft. A flywheel. All right. And a camshaft. Great. Then let's go home to our electronics shop. Let's buy 2 ignition coils and 2 spark plugs. Took those off the shopping list. Shopping list is empty. All right, back into the car. Let's go ahead to right click, part mount. Let's put the pistons on. We can use the old rings. Normally, I wouldn't reuse rings. I would just replace them. We're saving money. This is new game, new save. We're early. We'll just use the old rings. Put on the piston and the ring. And you could always double check if you're like, did I actually fix the part that I was supposed to? Well, there's a piston with connecting rod, green checkbox. Piston with connecting rod, green checkbox. So we fixed that part. That's good. Okay, so those are on. Now we can put our cylinder head back on. We can put our camshaft back on. Now, you're going to have to remember which camshaft was the bad camshaft. It was this back one, the one towards the firewall. This camshaft was the 75% one. So we'll put that one there. And the new one, replacing the 14% one, we'll put over on the left. And then we can put our camshaft caps on. Camshaft cap. Camshaft caps. Here we go. There's 4 per camshaft. Let's see. You get 2 experience for each one. 8 camshaft caps. That gives us 16 experience for just putting on the camshaft caps. All right. Let's go ahead and put the spark plugs in. Now remember, spark plugs, the bad ones were on cylinder 2 and 3. So I'm not going to put the 100% one in the first spot. I'm going to put the 72% one in the first spot. And then in cylinder 2, I'll put 100% one. Cylinder 3, I'll put 100% one. And I'm just going to change my mechanics view a little. And cylinder 4, I'll put the 70 or 69% one. Then we can put on our engine head cover and its corresponding bolts. And then ignition coils. We're going to put the 71% one there in position 4. 3 and 2, put the new ignition coils. And then in position 1 here, the 70% one. Then I'll come down to this side. Let's put on the camshaft gear. And a pulley. For idler roller. Serpentine belt. Belt tensioner. And the timing cover. And you can always move your mechanic around. You can adjust your zoom to find a spot where you can see the bolts comfortably. Crankshaft pulley. Then we can put on the belt and the idler roller. Okay, so this side is done. Let's head up over to the other side of the engine head and put on the new cam gear. Put on the timing chain that was new and the cam gear B and a timing cover. That side's done. We can put the exhaust manifold back on and it's 5 bolts and then slap the turbo back on. And there's 4 bolts here. There's 2 here, 2 there. Those bolts are on. And we can slide to the other side of the engine. Let's get the intake manifold. Well, actually, you know, before we do the intake manifold, if you get underneath here, let's go ahead and throw the injectors in first. Just because sometimes when you see the intake manifold, it's just harder to see the injectors. So the injectors are in. Let's put the intake manifold on. Those bolts are on. And put on the throttle. There's 4 bolts here. Very long bolts. All right, so that's back on. that is good for what we can do inside the engine. I don't know if we could do the flywheel in the engine bay. No, we can't. We have to be underneath the car to address the flywheel and the gears. So let's just right click and check our car status. So you can see we got the clutch plate, crankshaft bearing caps, which will get underneath the car. The flywheel, we have to have the car up. Front drive shaft, front sway bar, rod caps. Those are the rod caps that go on the bottom of the connecting rod of the piston. So we'll get that underneath the car. So let's go ahead and crank her up in the air. All right, so we'll get underneath the engine here. I'm going to click right on the crankshaft so that I can get up close. Right click, part mount. We'll put the rod caps on. And we only took off the rod caps that were bad, so putting them back in place, it really doesn't matter which order we're putting these on, because when we took 3 off, all 3 are replaced. So all 3 are 100% now. Same for these crankshaft bearing caps. We took off all 3 crankshaft bearing caps, and we're replacing all of them. All right, crankshaft bearing caps are on. Then we can go ahead and put the oil pan back on. Okay, and then slide my mechanic up, click on the flywheel, put on the new flywheel, the new clutch plate, and then we can put the old clutch pressure plate on. And clutch release bearing, and we can slap the trans back on. Now the starter, if you remember, we can't place the starter on right now. Like if I click on the starter and I go to replace it, it doesn't give me that option, because this is one of the starters you have to be in the engine bay. So when we drop the car down from being up in the air, we can put the starter back on. Front drive shaft, which is new. Then let's go to this side. Here's the wheel bearing. Put a new wheel bearing in so we can put the front drive axle on. Attach that bolt. We have a new sway bar, and then we can put the old links back in. Now I just moved my mechanic down so I could see that top bolt easier. And let's slap the wheel back on this side. All right, that wheel's done. I'm just going to escape out of that, and we'll pop to this side. Put a part mount. Now you can see the wheel bearing here pretty easy. If you have trouble seeing it, zoom in a little bit. Click on the back side, and then you can zoom all the way in and see that wheel bearing real easy. And we can put the drive axle on. We'll do it from this side this time. That way you can see the attachment bolt easy. Okay. Then there's the end link that connected to that sway bar. Look at it from this side. There's the nut. And there's the nut. Got it. Let's click on the wheel and put the wheel on. We'll get real close to these bolts. Okay, that part is done. I think the front end is put back together for everything we have taken off of it. Let's go to our car status. We'll see what we've done. So page 1 is done. Cam gears, cam shaft, clutch plate, crankshaft bearings, flywheel, front drive shaft, sway bar, ignition coils, pistons. The rear sway bar we have yet to do. And then there's, see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 parts we have yet to identify. Which my suspicion, like I said, we already looked at the engine pretty closely. We looked at the trans and pulled that. I'm suspecting there's going to be some brake parts maybe, or some suspension parts, excuse me, that have yet to be identified that may need replacing. And I think we're going to identify that. We take this sway bar off easily without having to pull the wheels? I think so. We'll identify that by taking this bad boy to the test track. Okay, to get that end link off and sway bar off, I have to pull the wheels. Okay, so let's go ahead and pull these rear wheels. If you're ever not sure, in expert mode, like, can I take this part off right now? You hear that doink? I'm trying to remove the center cross member here. It won't let me because there's parts that have to be removed before removing that part. So to remove this little link, which is what's holding that rusted sway bar, I had to remove the wheels first. Then I could take this little end link off. Now there's an end link on the other side that goes to that sway bar. So same thing on this side. Let's pull the wheels. Okay, wheels off. Then we can get in here close. And let's take this little end link off. Then we can go ahead and pull that sway bar. Great. Then we'll go to part mount, and we'll mount the new sway bar. Oh, we didn't buy it yet. So I'm just gonna, here's another way to add something to your parts list. I'm going to part mount. Let's say I didn't have this part. I highlight over it, hit X. That adds that that whited out sway bar to my shopping list. There it is right there. Rear sway bar A on my shopping list. And I'll pull up my tablet, go back to the car parts store, rear sway bar A. Part mount. Rear sway bar A. Got it on. And we'll go over here. Let's put those links back on. I can put the wheel on this side. And click over here and over here. Click down around here, slide the mechanic around, and there's the other end link. And then we'll put a wheel on. Then I'm going to drop this car out of the air, put the starter on, throw some oil in her, and then let's take it to the test track and just run it and see if there's any parts that the taking it for a test drive could show us. So to get to that starter, I'm just going to click on the throttle, click down on the oil filter, right-click part mount, click on the white starter, and put the starter on. Great. Oh, I didn't want to go to the rear wheel. Sometimes when I'm clicking between parts, I'll click the wrong part and I move my mechanic where I didn't want to go. But just click back and you'll go back. So let's go to part unmount, unmount the oil fill cap, and let's fill this bad boy with oil. While the engine's drinking oil, I'll drink some Pepsi Max. Here we go. So engine's got oil in it. We'll check on the old dipstick right in the hash marks. And let's go. We got the oil part done. We have the first pages of parts figured out and a few parts that have yet to be discovered. All right. But now we can start this bad boy. So I'm going to right click here, go to my map. Let's take this car to the test track. The test track is fun. Even if you just go here just for fun, it's fun. So I'm going to change the view of the car just so I'm riding behind it. You can ride in front of it if you wish. So to start, it's just WASD if you're using the keyboard to drive. Brake is S, obviously. So we start off, we go through the salam test. Straight here. I have it on a manual transmission. I almost forgot to shift. And whoa, whoa, whoa. We'll just not tell the customer we did that. Go through the bumps. And then stop here right in the red. That tests the brakes. And then you'll get a report off that test drive what parts may or may not be screwed up. Sometimes this will answer questions for you. Sometimes it won't. And here we go. What do we have going wrong? Every rubber bushing on this car is screwed up. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 rubber bushings are screwed up. Just throwing out a guess here. If I go to car status and phone, rubber bushing, rubber bushing, rubber bushing, those were all of the unidentified parts. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we need 10 rubber bushings. And if you're wondering where those rubber bushings are at, go to examine mode. It's the rubber bushings that are in the main cross member at the front, all 4. The rubber bushings here in the back, there's 4. And then there's the 2 off of those cross members on the back. So pretty easy to get to. So I'm just going to go to the store, car parts, go here to the suspension part. I'm just going to scroll down, and there's rubber bushings. I could have searched for them. I could have typed them in. I could have added them to my parts list. I could have removed them in multiple ways to get to these. But I just went to suspension, scroll down till I find rubber bushings. And I'm going to buy 10 rubber bushings. All right. So to get these out, you got to get the car up in the air. Click on this tire. Click here. And go to this rubber bushing. Let's take it out. This rubber bushing. Oh, that one's rusty. And I'm doing that from a distance away. You don't have to be close to the parts to remove them. I'm going to click this cross member. These rubber bushings. So there's the 4 in the cross member in the back, the 4 in the cross member in the front, and the 2 on those suspension arms in the rear here. So that gives us 10 bushings. I'm just going to pop them all off first, and then we'll go back and install all the rubber bushings. This one clearly is rusted. You can just see that bolt. So I'm just going to right click on it with the Canon WD-40. Get that off. Whoa, too far. There's another rubber bushing. Rusty as all get out. Have some WD-40 bushing. That one looks fine. And one more rubber bushing. You'll get pretty good as you click through your car parts, moving your mechanic around just by clicking the parts. It says right click, part mount. And let's put in the nice new rubber bushings. So like any good mechanic, you're going to use all the diagnostic tools at your disposal when you're trying to figure out what's going wrong with the car. Do you have tools? Oh yeah, sure, we got tools. So we used our tools, the OBD scanner, the fuel, the compression tester, the fuel tester, tread tester. All those things are useful. You're going to use your eyes. Just look at things. If that fails, take the part off and look at it. You have a test track. Use the test track. There's going to be, use all the information available to you to try to get a diagnosis of what's causing this car to be wrong. I can tell you, a lot of that's very similar to medicine. So if you're trying to figure out what's wrong with a patient, you're going to listen to the patient. Try to understand what's going wrong with them based on what they're telling you. If you have tools like a stethoscope, use it. If you have some tests you can run, I'm going to run a test to see if you have strep. Great, run a strep test. I'm going to see if this car has some problems. I'm going to run it on the test track. So use all your tools to figure out what's going wrong with it. Saves you a lot of headache and time. All right, so let's just double check car status. All the pages are green. Change oil and drain. Green. We've done it. Go to complete order. This is a $4,479 job. That is excellent. Let's go ahead and finish the order. And you notice I had the car up in the air, and you can finish you don't have to drop it. It just does that automatically when you finish the order. And that leveled us up to level 8. Outstanding. And we got a case. All right, let's open the case. Maybe we'll get lucky and get another case change or chain like we did last time. Let's start with 1 and 2. Well, we got a map and we got some scrap. Not bad. And we have a whole bunch of old parts here that are bad. We'll just use the sell part function. Sell off all the old parts. So we're up to 7,400 scrap. Or 7,400 cash. 196 scrap a doodle, which is good. We have 1 skill point. I'm going to hold off on that for now. I'm going to hold out to get this. Oh, we have 3 skill points. Available skill points 3. So yeah, let's unlock that. All right. So we just got another 5% discount on parts. This is a useful function too. When you start going to auctions, you start going to the junkyard, you're going to want to have a value of the car or an idea of it. So this trains your mechanic to kind of evaluate cars and get an idea of its value, which is going to be very useful before you know that you want to purchase a vehicle or not purchase a vehicle. So we don't have any more skill points to place. We don't have our 10K of cash yet. Let's see. I'm doing okay on time, so let's do this. We could do the next story car, but I think we're going to hold off on that for the next video. But let's go ahead and do a customer card just for some cash. Let's see what we got here. Now you look at these car orders as they come in. Sometimes you get an option for bonus experience. So I'm going to take that order before it runs out of time. Sometimes you can get bonus credits. Those are good ones to look for. This one, change the oil, poor brake performance. Loud, hard to control. There's no bonuses here, but the one we just took had a bonus to experience. So let's look at this car. Car status, go straight here. Poor brake performance, parts are not discovered. Now how could we identify this? Well, go back to our tool. So we have a tool to diagnose brakes. No. We have our eyes, so we can look at the brake parts. We could take it to the test track, run it through the salam bumpy things and stop in the red. That'll identify brake parts. The others is kind of knowing which parts can be broken in the brake system. So there's only so many brake parts. If you were curious how many brake parts there are, here's an easy way to look at it. Go to your tablet, go to the store, car parts store, go to brakes. So here's the parts that can break. Brake calipers, brake caliper cylinders, disc brakes, drum brakes, the brake shoes, the brake cylinder. So there's only so many parts. The other 2 parts that can be affected by brakes, ABS module and ABS pump. So my advice would be, 1, you could take to the test track, which is just fun. So if you wanted to do that, that would give you your diagnosis real quick. The other would be, let's start looking at the parts. So if you look here, the ABS module typically is going to be on the firewall on most cars. Look at how rusty this part is. This to me says this part probably is bad. If you're not sure if it's bad or not, take it off. So I'm just going to pull it. There's 6 little bolts here that hold this sucker on. And one here is rusty, so can of WD-40. And then go to your inventory. ABS module is at 9%. Now if I right click, go to car status, boom, part identified, ABS module. So we know that one's bad. Let's just go ahead and go to our tablet. Let's buy a new ABS module. Go to part mount and go ahead and put that on. So we knew that was going to be bad right off the bat. So we have 1 part already fixed in the brake system on this vehicle. So where are the brakes at? Well, they're right behind the wheel. Now looking at this brake, that looks bad. Look at all the surface rust on this caliper and on that disc. So that looks to me like 2 parts that are broken. Let's go over to the other wheel. The disc looks fine. The caliper looks crappy. Okay. Let's click on the back wheel. This disc looks okay. The caliper looks fine. That pad doesn't look bad. Okay. Let's look at the brake on this side. Okay, looking at this. Disc looks okay. That caliper looks bad. So I'm thinking it's the front two brakes and this right driver's side rear brake caliper that's probably bad. So I'm going to move the car into car lifter A. I'm going to go ahead and pop her up in the air. All right, she's up in the air. Let's click on this front wheel. We got 4 bolts that are not rusty and 1 rusty bolt. Okay, let's take this caliper off. Take the 2 bolts off the back. That pad looks fine to me, but let's look at that caliper. Caliper's at 24%, the cylinder was at 83%. And right there, brake caliper. Okay, so we know we need one of those. Go back to our tablet, go to the brake part of the store. I'm going to buy 1 caliper. I'm going to mount that caliper with the 83% brake caliper cylinder from the old one. 2 bolts, and put the wheel back on. Done. Now let's click on this wheel, slide over to this side. Let's take this wheel off. Hey, the bolts on this side is not rusty. That's nice. All right. And this caliper looks terrible. Let's pull that caliper. This brake pad looks bad. This disc looks bad. Then I'm just going to go to my car status, brake caliper, brake disc ventilated, and brake pads. So these 3 parts need to be replaced, which is kind of what I suspected. So if I go here, brake disc ventilated, brake pad, and a brake caliper. Then I'll right click, part mount, put on the new vented disc brake, a nice brake pad, the new caliper, and a 78% cylinder, and then slap the wheel back on. And then you can always check your car status. Hey, that fixed it. Now there's one part we haven't discovered, and just from looking at our mechanic peepers on this bad boy, I think it was the caliper on this back driver's side rear. Let's pop this wheel off, and let's take this caliper off. That brake disc and pad don't look terrible. Hey, and that we were right. It's a brake caliper. So we'll go back to our tablet, and we'll buy 1 more brake caliper. Put a part mount. Brake caliper, 66% cylinder. And put the wheel on. There we go. And then we'll right click the car, go to car status. You'll see that we've repaired the brakes performance on this car. Go to our complete order. We just got a $1,500 brake job done. Finish. Boom. And that gave us some bonus experience. Almost leveled us up to level 9 just on that 1 brake job. So I think this is going to be a good spot to stop. We'll go ahead and sell these parts. Get a little extra money from the sale of those parts. We'll save it. Next will be our next story car, which a preview here is going to be a 1966 Bolt Hornet, also known as a 1996 Chevy Camaro. Again, apparently, there's some cars in here that are called Chevrolets. Some are not. This is a Chevrolet. That's fine. But that'll be our video number 4, or Heck, number 5 now. So I hope you enjoyed video number 4. Lucas Isaac Parker. Hope you dug it. Thank you all for watching. I appreciate it very much. Take care.